Welcome to Relationship Truth Unfiltered, a podcast that ditches destructive traditions and delves into real biblical teaching about relationships. Welcome. I am Julie Sedanko here with relationship expert Leslie Vernick. Today we tackle a question that haunts many of us who are in difficult marriages and destructive marriages. How do you know if you've done all you can to save your marriage, especially when your spouse says the right things, but nothing ever truly changes? In this episode, we will debunk the myth that it takes two to break a marriage and explore the harsh reality that one person can indeed kill a relationship. We'll talk about what it actually takes to maintain a marriage and why sometimes, despite our best efforts, we need to accept our limitations and make tough decisions. Leslie, can you talk to the woman listening right now who has tried everything she knows to save her marriage? She's pleaded with her husband, dragged him to seminars and counselors, prayed as if her life depended on it, and nothing really changes. How does she know she's tried everything and the marriage is indeed dead?
Well, let me just back up a bit, Julie, because I'm not sure it is dead. It might just be disappointing. So I think this is oftentimes where a woman has a view of, I need my husband to be my soulmate, or I need him to be, more ambitious, or I need him to be more interesting, or I need him to be more, take the initiative in planning date nights. And he doesn't do that. And despite what he said, me nagging him and me talking to him, nothing changes. You may have a disappointing marriage, and that doesn't necessarily mean the marriage is dead unless you react to that disappointment in sinful, destructive ways. Lots of marriages go through disappointing seasons, have disappointing moments. Your spouse is not going to be your everything. It's a myth from Hollywood and Harlequin. The Bible doesn't tell you that your spouse is going to be your everything. And so I think part of doing any relationship long term, whether it's a good friendship or a good sibling relationship that outlasts, early childhood, or a good marriage, is that you have to come to accept that a person isn't everything you need, and you don't need them to be something in order for you to be okay or happy. And so I think there's a lot of marriages that may end prematurely because the person in the marriage is looking for all of their needs, or all of their security needs, or all of their fulfillment in one person, which is an impossible task.
I know I've heard you say before that you can live happily in a C+ marriage.
You certainly can, because most marriages are C+ marriages most of the time. Sometimes they have A+ moments, sometimes they have D- moments, but there is no perfect marriage. I've been doing marriage counseling for close to 40 years, and most marriages are okay. What you want to look for, the two necessary ingredients, are safety and trust. If those ingredients are missing, then you've got more of a destructive element to your marriage. But if it's just he's boring, or we don't have a great sex life, or he's not as ambitious I wish he would be, or she doesn't cook like my mom did, or her housekeeping skills aren't as great as I want. I mean, we all live with real people who don't meet our every expectation or need, and that's part of learning to love normal people, learning to forbear, learning to be flexible, learning to be tolerant of someone who's different than we are, who has different ideas of things and different, even different values. I remember early in my marriage, so I'm a firstborn, my husband's a firstborn, but we have very different, and I think part of it is male, female. So I'm the female, I'm working really hard, and I'm trying to get everything done around the house, and he's worked all week at work. And so he's seeing Saturday as a relaxing day. So
Right.
he's relaxing on the couch watching some sort of sporting event, and I'm in the garage cleaning the garage, and I'm like mad at him that he's not coming out and cleaning with me. And I go in there and I say, hey, I'm cleaning the garage, how come you're not helping me? He goes, hey, if you want to clean the garage on a Saturday, that's your choice, but I don't choose to spend my Saturday cleaning the garage. And it was like, what? What? You actually have this choice that you could make to not do this? Of course we have to do this together. Of course we have to do this now. And it was like a wake-up call for me. Like, he is separate than I am. He has different needs or different values, prioritizes things differently.
Okay, but Leslie, that's a wake-up call for you, really?
It was a wake-up call for me.
How did that conversation really go? Did you not get upset with him? Because I think 90% of women would be like, what?
I did get upset with him, but I went in the garage and I pouted and I mumbled and complained and grumbled to the Lord, and he really showed me, why does he have to do what I think he should do on a Saturday in order for me to be okay? Right? So I am not his God. I am not his conscience. I am not his priority maker. And if he worked all week and felt like he needed to relax on Saturday, who am I to say that that's not a good decision?
Okay, I want to start this episode over because I'm feeling too much conviction right now. But you're right. You're right.
Well, I think because our population is mostly in destructive marriages, I don't want to start our podcast saying, I've done everything I can to get my husband to be the way I want him to be, and that ends our marriage. He
Right.
doesn't have to be the way you want him to be. He has to be the way he wants to be and the way God wants him to be. And that's part of marriage, is accepting the person you married, not the person you thought you married.
So I think then what you're saying is, before you just start saying, I've done everything I can, I've dragged him to all the counselors and everything, you need to say, why? Why are you dragging to these counselors? What is it that you're trying to change? And is it really a make it or break it type of
Issue, yeah.
issue?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and if you're being really respectful of him, to be able to say, what kind of marriage would you like? Are you happy? Is this going the way you want it to go? It's not going the way I want it to go. Maybe I have unrealistic expectations, or maybe I have reasonable expectations. And let's have a conversation about that. And if we need a third person to navigate that conversation in a healthy way, that's something we both can learn. But I think so often we kind of come into marriage with this unrealistic idea that he's going to, or she's going to, fulfill me and make me happy and be my everything and take care of me and make all my boo-boos go away and take away all my unfulfilling feelings and all my depression and all my loneliness and all my there is no such person. We have to do our own work. And so I think I just want to start this podcast by saying there are some really destructive elements to people and some really destructive marriages, and I do want to talk about that.
Right.
But for the majority of people who might be in a disappointing marriage or a difficult marriage, keep trying. Keep trying to do your work to be the person that you're to be. And it might be that you grow more than your marriage grows, but you grow to accept the person he is and not the person you thought he should be. And you give him and God the opportunity to change him into the person he wants to be.
That's so good, Leslie. Give me an idea of what the difficult and disappointing marriage looks like. I know you have a little bit, but how does a woman really do her own work to be okay in a difficult or a disappointing marriage? Because, yeah, maybe it's not something that's divorce worthy, but she's still sincerely unhappy. So, what kind of work does she need to do?
I think to ask herself some good questions like, what am I wanting from him that he's not giving me? Right? So, or what am I telling myself I need from him? So I need him to be what? I need him to be more romantic. I need him to be more ambitious. I need him to be more thoughtful. I need him to be taking the initiative in date nights. I need him to be a better parent. What is it that you need from him in order for you to be okay? And so you're putting your well being in his hands. Is it true? Is it really true that you need all these things from him? I don't fault you for wanting those things. I want plenty of things too. I wanted him to help me with the garage, right? Did I need him to do that in order for me to decide to clean the garage with a good spirit? I told myself I did, but God showed me I really didn't. So then I got the decision to make, hey, do I want to keep cleaning the garage because I want the garage clean? Or do I want to go relax too and do something fun for myself and quit driving myself to have to get it all done and stop being resentful that he made a different choice?
When it comes to something like, I want him to be a more involved parent, though, that's a little different than cleaning the garage.
Well, and I think that's where you have to have a conversation with him and saying, hey, my picture of being a good parent is that we're involved. And his idea might be very different. So it might not be that he's not a caring parent. It might be, hey, I think you're overly involved in the kid's life. I think you need to give them some rope. I think you need to give them some independence. They need to make their own decisions. I'm not in there trying to micromanage their life. And so he might be just as an involved or just as a caring parent as you are, but he sees parenting very differently than you do.
Yeah. So, what then, Leslie, are you talked about safety and trust. So, give me a couple ideas of, I mean, obviously, we know if somebody's beating you, that's a major safety issue, but what are some other red flag safety and trust issues that a woman might be dealing with?
Addictions, repeated porn, repeated affairs, repeated deceit, patterns of neglect, major, not just, oh, I don't want to clean the garage on Saturday, but hey, I don't want to help you with the finances. I don't want to help you with the kids. I want to be one of the children here and play video games all weekend. I don't want to work full time. I want you to take care of me. That might be a deal breaker that you're not really a partner in any way. So, controlling over you, that you don't get a choice, you don't get a voice when you try to have a conversation or you try to disagree. You're given spiritual mandates about submission, and he's the head and he's your authority and you have to do what he says, and you don't have a voice or you don't have a choice. Those kind of safety and trust issues devalue and diminish your personhood. And those are destructive. And so those would be more of the deal breakers in marriage: the chronic deceit, chronic addictions, chronic abuse, chronic devaluing of you and your needs as a person. And I think those are things that you can speak up about and say, hey, this hurts me. This makes it hard for me to want to be intimate with you. This makes me not trust you. Our marriage is dying. Does that matter to you? Those are things that you can do to try to wake him up to his side of the street. Um, but just because he's not planning a date night, or he didn't buy you flowers for Valentine's Day, or the things that are disappointing in a marriage, isn't necessarily meaning that the marriage is dead.
Okay. So maybe you do have these issues where he thinks that you need to be submissive to him at all times, that your body is his, and whether you like it or not, he should be able to have sex with you at the drop of a hat, or some of these other safety and trust issues. I know I interviewed a lady recently whose husband had a gambling addiction and it didn't get better. Um, you take him to counseling, you take him to the church conference and all of this, and it's not getting better. How do you know that's it? It's dead.
To have a relationship with someone in any level, whether it's a professional relationship or a personal relationship, you have to trust that person to some degree. I mean, I'm not even going to go to my doctor if I don't trust them, or my dentist, or my financial advisor, or my neighbor. I'm not going to ask them to, hey, here's a key to my house. If I'm not home, can you let my kids in, or any of those. I'm not going to do that with someone if I don't have some level of trust in them to be a good steward of the resources that I give them. So there has to be some level of trust to have a relationship with someone, of safety and care, right? So I trust that I'm safe with you, or my stuff is safe with you, and I trust that you care about me. Not that you do everything I want, but that if you're impacting me in a negative way, or you've done something that causes me harm or distress, and I tell you about that, that matters to you. Those are some of the basics of any relationship. So if I'm going to a therapist and I'm saying, hey, I don't feel like you've heard me, and that therapist says, well, that's your problem, I'm gonna like, that relationship is broken, right? I'm not gonna continue to go to them, that they showed me that they didn't care about how I'm feeling. Or you fell asleep in our last session. That bothered me because I paid $150 for that, and you took the money and you fell asleep, halfway through it. And they say, well, too bad, they don't that bothers, me, and I'm not going to continue to do business with you. Even in the most basic levels, we stop doing business. If we're healthy, we stop doing business, or we stop interacting with people that we don't feel safe with, and we don't feel care about our feelings, to the not to the everything we want, but to the degree of safety and trust. So when you're in a marriage with someone, that's promised. Like, that's promised in a marriage, that I promise that I will protect you and I will keep you safe and I will love you and cherish you and honor you. And so those are basic promises in a marriage covenant relationship to create that kind of safety, where you want to have intimacy with that person and you want to bring children into this family and create a safe environment to raise the next generation. And when that safety and trust begins to get fractured through chronic deceit or chronic indifference or chronic abuse, and there's no change, even though you've dragged them to counselors or they've said they're going to change or they promise they're not going to watch pornography anymore, they promise they're going to stop their gambling addiction, and yet all the money's gone from the retirement and all the money's gone from your checking account, what do you do then?
I think there's just such a desperation that maybe if I do this, he'll get it. Maybe if he hears it from this podcast or from this pastor or from this counselor at this marriage retreat, then he'll get it. Then he'll get it. Then he'll get it. How do we kind of gently tell this lady, honey, he's not going to get it? I mean, how does she know? I mean, it is time to take your kids and get safe.
Well, just like he's not getting it, for whatever reason he's not getting it, she's not getting it either.
Right.
Right? And so just telling someone, hey, honey, you're not getting it, isn't going to help them get it. Because self-deception is a powerful thing. We don't want to get reality sometimes. So he doesn't want to get reality that, hey, I'm trashing my life, I'm addicted, I'm trashing my marriage, I'm trashing my wife's feelings, I'm trashing trust, I'm trashing it. He doesn't want to get it. And you don't want to get it that he doesn't care. Because once you get it, that opens up a whole other boatload of pain.
It does.
Right? For him, I've, made a mess of my life. I've made a mess of our finances, that pain. Or my marriage isn't going to make it and I'm going to be by myself with these kids, or I'm not going to have someone who cares about me and I don't know what to do and I've never lived alone and that feels terrifying. And so it's not just about him not getting it, Julie. I think sometimes we don't want to get it. We don't want to face the truth, just like they don't want to face the truth.
That's so hard.
It is.
And, these issues, there are some of them that you can't fix all by yourself. It will take both of you.
It absolutely does. And so I think the advice that we can begin to say to people who are listening to this is that, when Jesus says that the heart is deceitful above all else and desperately wicked, we are experts. Not just your husband or the destructive person is an expert at lying to himself. We're all experts at lying to ourselves. And so one of the very first ingredients of good mental health is self-awareness, right? So that we have to see what we're not seeing. Jesus says, if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. And when we're in a destructive marriage, it's very tempting to focus on what he's not seeing. He's not seeing he's being destructive. He's not seeing he's being unhealthy. He's not seeing that he's trashing his life. He's not seeing that he doesn't love me well. All of that. And that may be all true. But what are we not seeing? What are we not seeing? We're not facing the truth either. That, wow, I better prepare myself to be alone because he's not changing. Instead of me spending all my energy trying to get him to change, maybe the truth is, I don't know that he's going to change. And right now, I better start taking some college classes. I better get myself some therapy. I better do what I need to do to get safe and sane so that I can take care of these kids if he wigs out and never changes. What am I going to do? Right? But we're so invested in saving our man or our marriage that we're avoiding the truth every bit as much as they're avoiding the truth.
So let's say that you're realizing we don't have addiction issues. I'm incredibly disappointed in this marriage. I need to kind of recognize that and do my own work. But what are some consequences maybe that a woman could begin to implement so that things do begin to change for the better in her marriage?
This is again the lie that we think that if we do the right thing, if we find the right consequences, if we drive safely to the airport, we're going to get to the airport in a safe way. We can't control outcomes. All we can control is what we do. Right. And so I think this, again, is a lie that we tell ourselves, that if only I can figure out the right thing to do, then he'll wake up or then everything will be fine. Right.
Right. Exactly.
So I think that this shift in our mindset has to be, I need to do the right thing because that's the kind of way I want to live my life. So let's say Jesus says to forgive him, or Jesus says to love him, or Jesus says to be forbearing with certain sins and not be forbearing with other sins. So let's just say he's not real ambitious. He doesn't help you as much with the kids as you. It's a disappointing marriage. How do I come to peace that that's the man he is and love him? And it might not be romantic love. It might not be, my heart is pitter pattering for him. It might be, how do I accept him and love him and speak the truth in love to him with the hopes that he will wake up and want more for his life than just watching TV and video games all day? But I can't control that. You see, we want a formula. We want, if I do this, then this will happen. We want a guarantee that if I forgive you, you will never hurt me again. If I take you back, you will change. If we go to counseling, things will work out. There is no promises for those things, right? We want them to be, but the reality is that all we can control is what we do in the here and now. So I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to put my seatbelt on. And you had a sister who died in a car accident, right?
Yeah.
We can do all the right things and still end up with loss and tragedy, right? So there's no promises that say, if we do this, this will save our marriage. Or if we do that, he'll come to his senses. Jesus spoke to Judas. He spoke to the Pharisees. He spoke to the rich young ruler. None of them came to their senses.
That's a good point. You have a very powerful analogy that you make, or example that you talk about, and it's likening marriage or a dead marriage to CPR, and how one person is trying so hard to keep it alive, but you can only do CPR for so long. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I think there's times when a marriage is kind of dying and you might be doing CPR, just like if someone were dying in a restaurant, or your husband was having a heart attack, and you of course would do CPR on them. But at some point when you do CPR, and it's a good thing to do CPR. So I think if you can do CPR in your marriage, do it. But at some point, that person who you're doing CPR on has to begin to quicken. Their heart has to begin to start beating again. When you use the paddles, when we see it in the TV or you see it in an emergency, they use the paddles and they use them a couple times and they do CPR, and they might do that for an hour or two. But if the person's heart doesn't start moving on the EKG, if it doesn't start beating on its own, they call it. They call it. They don't keep doing CPR for 2 days, 3 days, 5 years, 10 years. They call it, this person is dead. They're not coming back. And so I think there's things that we can do CPR wise, speaking the truth in love, implementing consequences that may wake our husbands up, like strong ammonia wakes up someone who's unconscious. There's things that we can do that may, but there's no guarantee, right? Just like when you do CPR, there's no guarantee that what you do is going to quicken their heart. You hope it does, and so that's why you do it. But there's no promise that if you do this, if only you do this, they will wake up. And I think that's been the ankle weights that so many Christian women have been given in the church, that if you do this and somehow if he doesn't wake up, you're not doing it enough, you're not doing it right, you're not doing it God's way, and so you've got to learn a different way to do it. But many good women have applied lots of CPR to their husbands and have not woken their husbands up any more than Jesus woke up Judas or the Pharisees.
Well, and I think too, what they realize is that in their efforts and their desperation, they start becoming somewhat destructive in their own marriage as well, and don't necessarily like the person that they're becoming in this desperation to revive a marriage that maybe is dead.
And again, maybe it's because I'm at the age that I'm at. So, I'm, in the senior citizen age range now. So the idea of death is much more in front of my face than it was when I was 40. It doesn't mean that I didn't have friends whose husband died at 40, but it's more likely at this age. I see my friends, going through that. And so one of the things that's really important is that we don't feel afraid of these losses, that yes, we are going to lose our spouse, or we are going to lose our health, or we are going to lose some things as we get older. And some people lose them earlier. But I think part of a healthy person is saying, if I had to, I could live alone. If I had to, I could figure this out. If I had to. And so sometimes we cling to a really unhealthy marriage because we haven't done our work at being a separate person. And so we're so invested in being a married person. We're so invested in keeping our marriage together that we are spending and wasting our years doing CPR on a dead marriage, thinking that that's God's will, when maybe it's God's will for us to start learning how to balance our checkbook and get a job, so that when we accept the reality of a broken marriage, we have the capacity to take care of ourselves.
Leslie, what you just said, the phrase, I can live alone, I can take care of myself. I know that just scared some people to death because they don't believe that.
Right.
How does that woman listening who feels that fear in her heart when she hears you say that change so that she doesn't feel so afraid?
I think it's a mindset start. And I think that women, especially, have been kind of groomed, educated, taught, especially women in the church, that you need someone to take care of you. You need a parent to take care of you. You need a husband to take care of you. If your husband dies, you need another husband to take care of you. I mean, we've not really fully moved into adulthood, because adulthood means you can take care of yourself in every way. You can take care of yourself. Doesn't mean you don't have connections and relationships. We're not meant to be independent, completely isolated from people. We're to be in community, we're to live in relationships, but we're also to be capable as an adult to take care of ourselves. And I think so many people go from high school to college, or high school to marriage, and high school to college, to college to marriage. And they've never had to take care of themselves. They've never had to pay their own bills and live in their own apartment and be by themselves and figure out how to set up the internet themselves and all the things that adult people have to do or pay someone to do for them. They just depend on each other to do for them. But sooner or later, even if you have a good marriage, your spouse dies. And I remember when my brother lost his wife. It was a very sudden death, and he was only in his early 40s. And he married right out of high school, and he didn't know how to be a full adult. Like, he didn't know how to pay their bills. He didn't know how to
Mm-hmm.
work the computer. He didn't know how to parent his kids, because his wife sort of took over everything, and he just worked and brought home the paycheck. And so all of a sudden, he's got to be a dad. He's got to learn how to pay the bills. He's got to learn how to take care of the house. He's got to learn how to still go to work. And it was the best, worst thing that ever happened to him,
Wow.
because he turned into an amazing adult. But he never had to do that until crisis hit. And so I think for some women and some men who find themselves in a situation where they had an unexpected divorce, I think it's a moment to say, what is it about this that scares me so much? Of course, it's painful. It's painful to lose a relationship that you love, whether it's through death or divorce. But to be able to say, what scares me so much about this is that I don't know how to live alone. I don't know how to take care of me. And so that might be, instead of working so hard to try to do CPR in a marriage that's not coming to life, maybe taking some time to do CPR on your own life and saying, what do I need to learn in order to be capable of accepting reality that my husband is not a faithful man and I can't trust him. And so reality says, whether I leave him or he leaves me, our marriage is not here for the long term.
Today is actually the anniversary of one of my very best friends in California. And I can't remember how many years it's been. It's been a long time ago. She and her husband were driving down the road. They had a preschooler, a toddler, and she was, I want to say, 7 or 8 months pregnant with their third child. And he just stopped breathing in the car and unexpectedly died. And here she's, going to have a newborn. And to this day, she's never remarried. And she had help with family and everything, but she got through it, and she has raised three absolutely beautiful, wonderful children. Never ever, and he was a wonderful husband, but I will say this, he was a financial planner and had her set in a way that they were prepared for it. And I think that's one of the things you're saying is be prepared. Maybe you need to start getting prepared in case this marriage does end and needs to end if your safety is in jeopardy. So, whatever that looks like, he had, thank God, life insurance prepared for her. That helped her quite a bit. Do you wonder whether your marriage is just difficult or if it's actually destructive? Leslie has a quick start guide that will help you answer that question. Not only that, if you find your marriage is in the destructive category, this guide will give you concrete biblical answers on your next steps. Go to leslievernick.com/start to get your free quick start guide and start a personal growth journey that will impact all of your relationships.
But I think even when you don't have any marriage problems at all, let's say you have a great marriage,
Mm-hmm.
I still think part of being an adult is being prepared
Yes.
and capable of taking care of yourself. And so if my husband didn't know how to pay the bills and didn't know how to cook, I might say to him, "Hey, I might die before you. We have a good marriage. I might die before you. Here's the passwords to the checkbook. Here's how you pay the bills. Here's how, so that you can do this if I'm gone." I mean, the stress of a divorce or the stress of a death is stressful enough. But if you're lost and you don't know how to turn on the computer and you don't know where any passwords are, or you don't know how to earn a living if you have to, or you don't know how to, apply for a job online, or you don't know how to do certain things that adults need to know how to do, and that matters to you, or you have to learn how to do that, then I think it's really important that you take the responsibility of saying, wow, there's some adult things that I haven't learned how to do yet. And I need to learn how to do that so that I'm not left stressed if our marriage doesn't make it, or my husband dies and our marriage is great, but he's gone.
That's so good. Going back a little bit to that difficult or destructive marriage, we talked in the intro about just common maintenance. You've talked about how a house, you have to have the air. My husband, he was changing the air filter the other day and it was absolutely disgusting. And, those common maintenance issues that need to be done. So, what does that look like if you realize it's destructive or disappointing because we just haven't done any maintenance? What is that regular type of work that needs to be done?
Well, we know this is true for even our bodies, our gardens, our houses. We need maintenance. Like if you didn't wash your dishes and you didn't clean the crumbs off your counters and you didn't vacuum and you didn't do laundry and you didn't take out the garbage, I mean, what would your house look like after a week, after 10 days, after 30 days, after 60 days? So our house needs maintenance. Our body needs maintenance. What would your body feel, smell like, look like if you didn't comb your hair, you didn't take a shower, you didn't, cut your nails, you didn't brush your teeth, you didn't do your maintenance on your body for a week or two? I mean, you wouldn't be at your best. And so somehow we have this idea that if a marriage is meant to be and it's good, it just, we get married and it just is automatic, but that's just not true. And I had my daughter was in college, and when I spoke to marriage conferences, I would often use this illustration because men get this. I would say my daughter had this new car, wasn't a new car, but new to her, for college, and this little oil light went on. It said,
Oh, no.
check oil. And of course, that's maintenance. You need to check your oil. It's maintenance. You need to get your gas in. You need to check your tires. You need to check your oil. So she was ignoring that check oil light. Oh, the car's still running fine. I don't need oil. I'll just wait till I go home and dad can do it. Right.
Right.
Well, she never got home because the car froze.
Ugh.
And now the car doesn't need oil anymore.
It needs an engine.
That, yes, that ship has passed. And this
Mhm.
is what happens to marriage. So when you're not maintaining your marriage, and then all of a sudden it starts to break down, and someone has an affair, or someone is, frustrated and says ugly things, or, you want a separation, and now it's like, oh my gosh, let's have a date night. Well, date night is repairs. It's like putting oil in an engine that's broken. It's not gonna fix it now, and I think couples get confused, and even marriage counselors get confused when there's been an affair, when there's been an abusive incident or whatever. You go to couples counseling, and now, like, "Okay, go away for the weekend." This is all maintenance stuff. This is stuff that you should have been doing all along to keep your relationship close and fresh and keep a clean slate and all of those kind of things. And if you haven't done that, like if you have termites in your house, washing your dishes isn't going to do it. Cleaning up your crumbs off your floor isn't going to do it. You've got to deal with the termites, and that's called repair work. And that's a very different way of handling marriage issues. What are the repairs? And so, for example, when safety and trust have been broken down, you've had an affair, there's been major deceit or chronic deceit, or there's been any kind of abuse or disrespect in a serious way toward the personhood and dignity and value of the other, well, then some repairs need to be made. It's not about, oh, I'll just cook you dinner tonight or I'll buy you flowers. Those are all maintenance things. And so repairs need to be made. And every single marriage that is lasting more than a year is going to need some repair work. Just like if you build a beautiful house or you have a brand new car, it's still going to need repair work. It needs maintenance and it needs repairs. And when you ignore your maintenance signs, then it's going to have more repairs. And if you ignore the repair sign, your marriage is going to die, just like your body. If you have maintenance and you need to wash your armpits and you need to clean your teeth and all that kind of stuff, and you don't ever go, your tooth hurts and you never go, and now you have a big infection in your mouth, now you've got other issues to deal with. You've got repair work to do that costs a whole lot more money, takes a whole lot more time.
So what does, other than date night, what is regular maintenance of a marriage?
So maintenance is cleaning up misunderstandings, like you would clean up the kitchen, right? Maintenance is making sure we're on the same page about stuff. Are we clear on what we're going to do for Christmas? Are we clear about, how we're parenting our kids? Are we clear about what our goals are, finances are, all that kind of stuff? Have we talked about that? Are we on the same page here? If we're not on the same page, how do we compromise? How do we negotiate so that we're on the same page as a couple? Because we're walking this path together. And so what you do impacts me, what I do impact you. So maintenance is having conversations. It's also having fun together. It's remembering the good parts of your relationship. It's not just like when you do maintenance in your house. It's not just all cleaning stuff. Sometimes you're putting flower boxes in because you want your house to look pretty, right?
Right.
And you're painting your walls because you want them to look blue instead of orange. And it's not like it had to be done, but you want it to be done. And so there's date nights and there's remembering special occasions and going away for weekends and taking time for yourself. It's not just talking about hard things or even easy things. It's doing fun things together and remembering that you still like each other and you still have things that you enjoy doing together or finding things that you enjoy doing together. So that's all maintenance stuff. And that's wonderful. But if your roof leaks, you don't paint the bedroom walls. You don't do the dishes. You might still do that in terms of maintenance, but now you've got some repair work to do. And so when your trust and safety in the relationship break down, then date nights, sex, going away for a weekend, having fun together, I'm not saying don't do it, but it doesn't fix. It's not repair work.
So what would a repair, I guess in some of the big areas, if there's been an affair, what would repair look like? I mean, to me, it's bulldoze the place. But I know there have been couples that have recovered from this.
Mm-hmm.
What does repair look like in that situation?
So if I were the therapist and this was in my office, I would ask them some questions like, hey, what do you want to do about your relationship because it's broken? Trust and safety has been broken. So do you want to rebuild your trust and safety? Yes or no? And if you say yes, tell me what that would look like. What would you need to do to feel trust or safety for the one who was betrayed? And for the one who broke the trust and safety, if you were to have great trust and safety again, what do you think you would need to do to build that back?
And he's going to say, not have an affair.
That's not rebuilding trust. So in between, what are the steps that you need to do to reassure her that you're not going to have an affair? What are some building blocks to her trusting that you're not going to have an affair? Because when you married her, she didn't think you were going to have an affair either, but you did.
Right.
So what are the things that you need to do to rebuild broken trust? And so this is really putting the responsibility of the one who broke the trust on them to kind of say, or at least expose what they're thinking, because they might say, I shouldn't have to do anything. She should just forgive me, right? And forgiveness is an important element of this. If you can't forgive someone, obviously you're not going to trust them. But you can forgive someone and still not trust them.
What are you looking for when you ask them that question? What are you hoping that they will say?
I'm looking for their ability to self-reflect and be aware that they caused damage. They caused damage. It wasn't just, hey, I sinned. Can't you forget it and forgive me and get over it? Let's not talk about it anymore. Let's put the past in the past. That's the typical way someone wants to deal with major issues in a marriage that cause broken trust. That's not how you repair something. You don't just say, let's just pretend it never happened and let's go back to the way it was. We had relatives last month who went on vacation for 4 days and their toilet valve broke in their upstairs
Oh, no.
bathroom. And when they came home, the entire house was ruined. The entire house, because water had been leaking from upstairs, wrecked all their floors, upstairs, downstairs, and all the way to the basement, all their walls.
Oh, my goodness.
The whole house has to be redone for 4 days of water. Now, you don't come back and just say, well, let's just forgive this happened and let's move back. They can't move back in. The house is ruined and the house has to be fixed and repaired and rebuilt. So, in the same way, when a marriage has been fractured and broken, what does it take to rebuild that? And I would ask those questions, because if he's thinking all it takes is for me to say I'm sorry and let's get over it, and she's saying I don't think I can trust you again, they're miles apart. Right? They're miles apart. But for me to say to him, this is what you need to do, says he's not really thinking about the impact of his sin.
Well, that's what I'm looking for me, Leslie, is what does he need to do? Because I don't have any idea what it would take.
Well, if you hit somebody with your car and you saw their head bleeding and you saw their car damaged and you saw the impact, what would you need to do to make repairs?
Well, the first thing I would do is, I apologize and try to stop the bleeding. What do you need, and call 911 and make sure that they're taken care of. And then after the 911 type of stuff, I would have my insurance take care of them financially.
Okay, so yeah, you would do something to mitigate the harm caused, whatever the harm was. But you intuitively knew how to do that, right? And so that's why I'm asking the person who caused the harm, because I want to see, do you see the impact you've caused? Because oftentimes, at least in the population that I've worked in with destructive marriages, oftentimes they will feel shame over what they did, but they don't want to feel that shame. Now, shame is, it can be toxic, but it can also be very healthy.
Right.
Like, I don't want to ever feel this again, so I'm not going to do this again. I feel horrible about myself, right? And so, therefore, it motivates you to change your ways so that you don't feel that. And so, if someone isn't willing to do their work, to think about the impact you caused your spouse and what would it take to rebuild their trust, well, then they're really not capable of doing the work to sustain a relationship.
Okay.
Because throughout a relationship, we cause harm and damage. And just like if we caused harm to our neighbor on purpose or accidentally, we would know what we need to do. We would say, I have to pay for repairs. I have to care about the damage I caused. I don't expect a get out of jail free card because I'm a Christian and you're a Christian.
Well, now you talk about it like this, Leslie, and I put it in that car accident type scenario. If I translate that to a marriage situation, I can see a little bit more. I mean, I've shared in the past how my husband and I, we did have safety issues in our marriage. And there were times I got mad enough that I slugged the guy. And I'm embarrassed to say it, but it's still the truth. And when I had found you and got some help with that and realized I had become destructive and I didn't like who I was, I remember going to my husband and saying, I will never lay my hand on you again. And if I do, I want you to call the police. But I also told him, if you ever lay a hand on me again, I'll call the police.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. But I also made darn sure that when I felt my anger escalating, that I left. I mean, I really did take responsibility so that he knew and it took a long time that he knows that matter of fact, the other day I said to him, it's been a long time. And he said, yeah, I can't even, it's been so long since any of that ever happened, but it does take time to build. So
That's right. And so repair work takes time. Like my nephew, whose house this happened to, he's out of his house for 4 months, 5 months. It takes time for repairs to It's not like, let's put the past in the past and let's not talk about this again. That's not going to work. That's like whitewashing, or damage that's done and saying it's fine. It's not fine. You can't whitewash black mold out of a house. And so to ask the person, what do you think it would take to rebuild her trust? And for him to say, I need to learn to control my temper, and I need to learn to control my sexual impulses, and I need to learn to have accountability partner and be more honest with whatever it is that he comes up with. Then she can decide, is that helpful for her? Just like if someone says, hey, I will pay for your repairs, but I'm not going to pay for a rental car. Well, is that really enough for me to say I'm going to feel restitution here? No, it's probably not. Right. And so when someone says they decide what they're going to do to rebuild trust, then you can evaluate, wow, does this person really show true remorse and true compassion for the pain they've caused me? Even when you do something accidentally.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have another situation where a counselor did something. I don't think she did it on purpose, but she caused her client real harm. And instead of saying, you know what, I didn't know any better and I should have not answered it that way, I should have done that way, she's lying and making excuses, and it's just causing more harm. Right. And so even when you don't do something on purpose, you knock into somebody accidentally, you're rushing and you elbow somebody or you step on their toe, you still care about the damage that you caused. And if you broke someone's toe, you might say, let me drive you to the hospital and I'll pay for the repair, especially if they don't have health insurance, right? You didn't mean to, but you still take responsibility for that. But if someone's not willing to own that and see that they have caused damage to the other person that they say they love and the relationship, well, then for the woman to beg, plead, threaten, like, you've got to do this and why aren't you that's not going to help, because to force someone to do something they have no good heart to do isn't going to give you any peace or trust in that person.
So if that person isn't able or isn't willing to see an incredible breach of safety or trust, that may indeed be a dead marriage.
Yeah, that may be the deal breaker, and I see a lot of situations where maybe a parent has done some damage to their children, right? And I had a phone call yesterday where, the mom is being pressured, like, you need to tell our kids to, start talking to me again. And instead of him talking to the kids and saying, how have I damaged our relationship? And what do I need to do to repair that you feel safe enough to come visit me and you want to hang out with me? He's expecting her to fix that for him, which says to me that he's not self-aware enough to know that it's his responsibility to fix the damage he caused.
Mm-hmm.
But so often as women, we're so anxious to make our family better that we're over functioning, we're giving them a pass, we're telling them what they need to do, they're not doing it, and then we're getting mad at them.
Right. This is hard stuff.
It is hard stuff. And I think this is where I don't think we've really had good teaching on what it takes to make and sustain good relationships. And just like if you had a brand new house and it's beautiful, or a brand new car, it's beautiful, everybody understands you have to do maintenance and you have to do repairs to keep it that way. It's not going to last for 25 years if you don't pay any attention to it. And every time you nick it, you just leave it alone, right? It's not going to look good after that long. Well, marriage is a long relationship, right? I've been married almost 50 years. If you don't take some time to repair the nicks and damages, and you don't look at those things and fix them, your marriage isn't going to last for that long, because it will die if you don't put energy and effort into it.
Well, and I know you've said, Leslie, that it is possible for one person to kill a marriage. But when it comes to that maintenance and repair and keeping a marriage alive, one person cannot do it all on their own.
Right. Yeah. So one person can kill safety and trust, which I think are the two deal breakers in a marriage. When those things are gone, even if you lived with a roommate that you didn't trust and didn't feel safe with, it would be hard to live with that person, right?
Absolutely.
It would be taking its toll on you. And so when you're married to someone and you have sexual intimacy, you have financial intimacy, you have children together, you have spiritual intimacy, all of that is expected, and there's a lack of trust and a lack of safety, it takes its toll on you mentally and physically and every other way, emotionally. So if you're the one who's always trying to revive the marriage and the other person isn't doing their part, you're going to be exhausted and probably resentful. And you keep asking God, God, why aren't you bringing this person back to life? Why aren't they putting energy back into the relationship? And because they've killed it or it's dead and they're not coming back. And I think healthy people, healthy people live in reality at all costs. And sometimes the cost is really tough because you have to accept that the patient has died, and it's you don't want the patient to die, but it's the patient is dead. The marriage is dead.
Healthy people live in reality. That's good. Leslie, pray for the woman listening who is facing the reality of my marriage is dead, or maybe it's not dead, but I'm just really disappointed and I need to deal with that.
Yeah. And how do I live in a disappointing marriage and still put energy into caring and loving for someone who may not love me back the way I want? And I think those are all really important lessons to learn in life because that may be true of our adult parents. It may be true of our kids as well. How do I love someone who doesn't love me back the way I want them to?
And Leslie, I will say this. I find that sometimes once you come to that place of accepting who they are, you actually end up with a lot more peace instead of that constant disappointment. I know I did that in my own marriage. Like, all right, you know what? The dude's never going to take me out. So I'm just going to quit asking. And the minute I did, it was just like this peace. And for a long time, we didn't. But occasionally now, my husband will take me out. He will do things. And I think he was just so sick and tired of being nagged about it that now he feels like it's of his own will and his own volition. And it was a hard thing to accept or to quit asking for, but it brought me a lot of peace once I finally did.
Yeah, and I think that's part of maturity of accepting reality without resentment and accepting the reality of our spouse that they're not Prince Charming after all. They're not our savior. They're not going to make us happy and fulfill us and fill us with all kinds of fluttery feelings all of the time. It's just not the truth. And so if once we can kind of accept that and learn to love the person they are, even if we have to not live with them anymore and we can't trust them, how do we still love someone, including our enemies? And this is tough stuff. This is not something we can do easily. This is part of what Jesus calls us to. But the alternative is to live in resentment and hatred, which is giving the enemy a foothold in your own life, let alone your marriage, but in your life. And that will destroy you, not just your marriage. And so we really want to guard our heart like Jesus tells us to, like Proverbs tells us to. And that's all part of the work that we do in this mess of figuring it all out.
And also guarding our thoughts. I
Mm-hmm.
know that for me, changing my thought life was such a game changer because I recognized, and I don't think I did before, that my husband could do anything. And I somehow put a negative spin on it, on every little thing that he did. And I began to change that. And I began to consciously notice he makes breakfast for me on every day off that he has, and or he will get up with the kids so that I can sleep in. And those were things that I didn't always, I mean, I knew, but I didn't really consciously feel grateful for because I was so busy thinking about the negative things. And, sometimes it's like when he laughs, I will consciously say to myself, I love his laugh. It is so great. Or just whatever it would be. If he looks nice, taking the time to actually tell yourself and kind of rewiring your brain, I think, in the way that you think about your husband is something that is truly helpful in making a change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really learning to accept that he's not perfect. And can I live with him in his imperfections? And hopefully he'll change some of those. Now, if there's safety and trust issues, maybe you can't.
Right.
Other issues, maybe you can. And learning to say, hey, I don't need him to be a certain way in order for me to be happy and peaceful and joyful. Right? I might need him to be a certain way in order for me to feel safe. And if he's not, I have to get out of that situation. But I don't need him to be a certain way for me to be happy and peaceful and joyful. And that is a powerful reality.
Really powerful.
that my well-being, my emotional well-being is not dependent on how you treat me or whether or not you love me. And that is powerful.
God bless our ladies listening today. I hope that you hear this. And Leslie, would you pray for them?
Lord, it is sometimes hard for us to understand why you let us sit in the stew of our own misery for far longer than we want to. We want you to change him. We want you to fix him, and we want it now. But maybe the journey is not so much about him, but about us. And Lord, I am the first to say no woman should be abused or live in a relationship where she's scared and she can't trust someone for her well-being or safety. But there's lots of other disappointments that happen in relationships that we can create a story about that makes it about us and about our well-being. And we can't be happy unless they do something our way. And Father, that's just not true. And yet we are pretty married to that story most of the time. And it's taken me a long time to really wake up to that. And I pray that you would help the women who are listening, the woman who's listening, who's hearing, this is ridiculous. Why should I have to do this? Because it's your life.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only be in charge of your life. And so when we stop trying to fix his life in order for our life to be better, and we start focusing on how to make our life better, it gives us a whole new perspective and very different energy. And so, Lord, I pray that you would help husbands and wives understand that partnership and marriage is hard work, and it's wonderful and terrible at the same time often. It's hard work to love someone and to keep loving them when they disappoint us and don't do what we want. And yet, that's true of all kinds of people in our life, our parents, our children. How do we love them when they don't do what we want? They don't turn out the way we want. They don't believe the way we want. And they don't share the values that we want. And we sort of judge and condemn. Help us not to do that, Lord. Help us to love, even if we need distance and boundaries. Help us to learn to do that. Pray for a woman who's feeling unsafe and can't trust her husband and has been avoiding facing that reality, that she's been doing CPR on dead trust and dead safety, and there's no intent on his part to repair those things at all. He just feels entitled to get all the perks of marriage without doing any of the work. Lord, help her not enable that thinking in him, and help her to trust you and trust herself, even if she can't trust him, that you are at work in her to grow and mature and strengthen her. And we just thank you for others who have taken that journey, who have taught us how to do that. And I pray that you would just help the women who are listening to find that support that they need. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you for listening to Relationship Truth Unfiltered. If you need clarity on whether your marriage is difficult, disappointing, or destructive, go right now to leslievernick.com/start. It's totally private and will help you get clear on your next step. Until next time, may God bless all of your relationships with Him, with yourself, and with others.